Growing up, we weren't allowed to look at Grandma during her golden hour. I wish I never found out why. My family always had odd rules, but none were stranger than the one about Grandma's golden hour. Every evening at exactly 5:15 p.m., when the golden hues of sunset crept into her old Victorian home, Mom would make us wear blindfolds. No explanations, just blindfolds secured tightly, no peeking. "Why do we have to wear these things, Mom?" I'd ask more times than I could count. "It's for your safety, Blake," she'd always reply, her voice unwavering. During the golden hour, we don't look at Grandma. Grandma was sweet most of the time. She'd bake cookies, tell us stories, and hum lullabies while we sat around her on the living room floor. But as I got older, I couldn't shake the feeling that something changed about her every evening as the sun dipped lower. It was in the way she moved, or maybe in the tone of her voice, like she was almost someone else. One fall evening, curiosity got the best of me. Logan, my little brother, was at my side, tugging at his own blindfold with a frown. "Why do we do this, Blake?" he whispered. He was only 6, and like any kid his age, he was more than a little confused by our strange family ritual. I squeezed his hand. "Mom says we have to, so we will." But my voice trailed off as I considered the thought forming in my mind. Just a quick peek. It couldn't hurt, could it? When I was sure Mom was out of earshot, I adjusted my blindfold just enough to see a sliver of the room. The fading sunlight bathed everything in an eerie golden glow, casting long shadows along the walls. And there was Grandma, standing by the window, her back to us. "Grandma?" I called out softly. She didn't respond. But slowly she turned her head, almost as if she'd heard me despite the whisper. That's when I noticed it, her face. It was familiar yet wrong. Her skin was sallow, her eyes glassy and distant. There was a twisted grin on her lips that I'd never seen before, a grin that made my skin crawl. "Blake," she whispered, her voice thin and echoing as though it were coming from far away. "Why don't you take that silly thing off? Let Grandma see you." Logan tugged at my arm, sensing something was off even through his blindfold. "Blake, let's go. I don't like this." But I couldn't move, rooted to the spot by an odd mix of fear and fascination. "Grandma, what's wrong?" Her grin widened, stretching inhumanly across her face. "Don't you recognize your own grandma?" she asked, voice laced with mock hurt. My heart raced. Something about her felt all wrong, like this person standing before me was only pretending to be her. I shook Logan, urging him to keep quiet, but he was starting to sniffle, clearly scared. "Come on, let's go find Mom," I whispered, tugging at his hand. As we backed toward the door, Grandma's voice called after us, sharp and demanding. "Blake, Logan, stay with me. It's family time." Ignoring her, I pulled Logan out into the hallway, our footsteps echoing against the hardwood floor. We ran to the kitchen, where Mom was washing dishes, her back to us. "Mom!" I shouted, breathless. She turned, immediately noticing our uncovered eyes. Her face went pale. "You looked, didn't you?" she whispered, horror filling her voice. "We didn't mean to, Mom," I stammered, guilt and fear tightening my throat. "But something's wrong with Grandma." She looked at us like. Before I could finish, Mom's hand tightened on my shoulder. "Listen to me carefully. That wasn't your grandma. Not really." Logan looked up, eyes wide with confusion. "What do you mean, Mom?" She knelt down, her voice barely above a whisper. "Grandma isn't herself during the golden hour. She changes. It's why we wear the blindfolds. You must never look at her during that time. Never." Her words sank in, cold and heavy. I shivered, remembering the look in Grandma's eyes, hollow, empty, as if something else was staring back at me through her face. "Now, go to your rooms and put the blindfolds back on," Mom ordered, her voice firmer now. "And no matter what you hear, don't take them off until I come get you. Understand?" We nodded, though I could feel Logan trembling beside me. Mom herded us up the stairs and shut our bedroom door behind us. I pulled Logan close, trying to reassure him, but deep down, I wasn't sure I believed it myself. We sat there, blindfolded, listening to the strange creaks and footsteps that seemed to echo through the house. Occasionally, we'd hear Grandma's voice calling out our names, her tone eerily sweet yet filled with something darker, something that made me clutch Logan's hand a little tighter. "Blake," she cooed, her voice drifting up from the hallway. "Why are you hiding from Grandma?" "I miss you," Logan whimpered, burying his face in my shoulder. "Make her stop, Blake, please." I didn't know what to do. All I could think of was Mom's warning, replaying over and over in my mind, never look at her during the golden hour. After what felt like hours, the house finally fell silent. Logan had drifted off to sleep, his head resting on my shoulder, and I fought to stay awake, terrified of what might happen if I let my guard down. Finally, Mom came for us, her footsteps soft as she entered the room. "You're safe now," she whispered, lifting our blindfolds. Logan stirred, blinking sleepily. I looked around, half expecting to see that twisted version of Grandma lurking in the shadows. But she was gone. The house returned to its usual quiet self. Did she hurt you?" I asked, my voice trembling. Mom's face was pale, her eyes haunted. "No, but she's not well, Blake. She hasn't been well for a long time." I wanted to ask more, to understand why Grandma was like this, why we had to wear the blindfolds. But the look on Mom's face told me that some questions were better left unanswered. As I lay in bed that night, the memory of Grandma's twisted smile lingered, a chill seeping into my bones. I knew I'd never look at her the same way again. And every evening as the golden hour approached, I'd reach for the blindfold, praying it would be enough to keep whatever was lurking within her at bay. Over the following weeks, the golden hour became more of a routine, but each time it came, I felt the same unease creeping in. I still couldn't shake the image of Grandma's face, how it twisted in a way I couldn't explain. Logan had started having nightmares too, tossing and turning in his sleep, murmuring Grandma's name over and over. It wasn't just the evening hours that felt wrong anymore. It was everything. Grandma seemed to avoid us, keeping to herself in the dim corners of the house, her movements stiff, unnatural. Mom had become quieter, her eyes always scanning the house, always watching the door. When she thought we weren't looking, her face would twist with worry. It wasn't until a month later when Mom finally sat me down to explain that I understood the full truth. "Blake," she said, her voice strained, "Grandma was never supposed to be like this. She didn't always have these episodes." I stared at her, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "She made a terrible mistake, Blake, a long time ago, and now she's cursed." The word hung in the air, heavy and final. I felt my heart begin to pound in my chest. "What do you mean? What happened to Grandma?" Mom looked away, tears welling in her eyes. "There's something in that house, Blake. Something that changes her every evening. We just call it the golden hour because that's when it's at its worst." A knot formed in my stomach as I grasped the weight of her words. I could never look at Grandma the same way again. That night, as I lay awake listening to the wind howling outside, I heard it again, Grandma's voice, soft and familiar, calling my name. "Blake." I pulled the covers up over my head and pressed my face into my pillow, trying to drown out the sound. But the voice persisted, and just as before, I couldn't stop myself from wondering if maybe, just maybe, I was the only one left to save her.